Hi, Phil.
Hello, Andy.
Uh, this time we're going to be talking about business partnership agreements, and if you can explain, basically what a business partnership agreement is, and how if someone wants to get into a partnership with another company, the sort of things they need to have in their agreements.
Okay, certainly. I think ultimately a business partnership is a joint venture between two individuals or maybe even two businesses or two companies. It's slightly different, if you like, from a business contract that we've spoken about on a different day. It is, you've both decided that you're going to use each other's skills or financial base or branding or product or whatever it is, and you're going to, two's better than one, and you're going to work together to achieve something. So I see it actually as a joint venture. Now, when might you need a business partnership agreement? Well, as the word suggests, partnership. If you go into partnership with someone, a lot of people realize that at that point you would need a partnership agreement, and it sets out various things which perhaps we can talk about. But a lot of people don't think about having a partnership agreement when they form a company with someone. But you should actually have a similar agreement at that time. You're not partners, you're shareholders in that company, so we call it a shareholders agreement. And essentially they're very similar documents, they just apply slightly differently because you've got the Companies Act and you've got the Partnership Act that in each case have the rules that apply to you in your business together.
So what you're saying is that it's a very, very similar type of agreement, whether you're maybe starting a business and you're using someone else who is going to be your partner in that business. So that's a sort of partnership agreement, but it's not particularly a partnership agreement between two businesses, but it's a similar sort of thing.
Yeah. Ultimately they're all partnership agreements, I suppose. That's the simple way to think about it.
Yeah.
You're either in partnership but running a company because you want limited liability, or you're in partnership and you're running a partnership, and off you go. Now, the kind of things that you cover in these agreements, so the shareholders agreement with the company or the partnership agreement with the partnership, are quite similar. And it's very important when you first go into business with someone that you're not just thinking about what you're going to do and how you're going to do it from a sort of operational and brand management point of view. You also need to be thinking about how you're going to share the profits. How much money are you each going to contribute? If one of you is bringing a product and the other's going to be helping to sell that product, then you've got to be thinking about that type sharing arrangement, how you're going to treat that. If you cease to be in partnership, will you be able to take your product back, or does it now belong to you both? You need to be thinking about what happens if one of you die. You need to be thinking about what exit strategy you have, meaning selling the business. The way I see it, there are two types of business, and I include partnerships and companies when I say business. There's a family business that you run forever, or there's a business that's every other type of business, which is one that eventually you want to sell. And I think you need to be quite upfront about that, and you need to understand, when you would want to sell it. Now, guess what? It might be that economic circumstances are such that it isn't ready to sell after 10 years that you initially hoped for, but you nevertheless have to have a starting plan, as it were. You also have to have in the agreement protections. Not every shareholders agreement, partnership agreement, joint venture agreement, however you want to describe it, is equally weighted. You might find that one party has got 70% of the share of the business and the other party's got 30%. Well, as you would expect, if you're the 30%er, sure, it may be reasonable and right that you only receive 30% of the profits, but is it reasonable and right that you only have that you have a minority right within the running of the business and the say-so of the business? And there are various pitfalls to look at. So the key areas to cover are succession, exit planning, what happens on death of a partner, exit, and then the various protections against the rules that are contained in the Partnership Act and the Companies Act as they apply to you.
Do you think people go into business partnerships with the right attitude?
They do if they've decided they're going to put agreements in place.
So it's the agreement that cements the attitude, do you think?
Yeah, it is. I mean, the thing is, if you don't put that agreement in place at the beginning, you will probably never be able to do it. Because when you're in partnership with another party, it's all about trust. It's all about mutual respect. And if you, after 3 years, suddenly start asking for a shareholders agreement and the company you've been running apparently fine for the last 3 years, people start to wonder, well, why do we suddenly need a shareholders agreement in place? What's the reason? What was the trigger for you to make that decision? And ultimately, you just never get there. Or you suddenly start renegotiating your position with the other party. And if you don't have an agreement in place, it's probably because there are grey areas in how you perceive and both understand that partnership that company is going to run. And rather than confront those grey areas up front, you decided just to sort of get on with running the business. Maybe some people think to themselves, you know what, I'm not going to bother to put an agreement in place because I don't know if it's going to work or be successful. But if it is successful or it is going to work, then we'll put an agreement in place later. Too late. You have to go into it assuming it's going to be the most fantastic thing, get the agreement in place, and then get on and run it. Because if you don't, you allow wriggle room to your other party and all sorts of issues, and you also can open yourself up, particularly as a minority sharer of the business, to all sorts of circumstances outside of your control, but where and be in a position you don't necessarily need to be in, to be honest.
Well, thanks, Phil. That was incredibly interesting. We're going to take this up again in part 2 of this interview, where we'll be talking a little bit more about the business partnership agreement.